Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lori DeToro from eMaint and Fluke. Thank you for joining us for this month's Best Practice webinar. As software and sensor providers, we offer an array of webinars and other education, including product demos and product training. Our Best Practice webinar series focuses not on our technology and software, but on maintenance strategies and solutions with speakers from a variety of backgrounds to share their knowledge. We are extremely pleased to have with us today Dave Riper, Senior Reliability Consultant with Reliability Web, who will be presenting today's topic on why reliability leadership is required. Good morning, Dave. Good afternoon, Dave. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks, Lori. I'm really pleased to be on.
Awesome. While listeners are logging in, I want to give them a few minutes, and I wanted to ask you why you enjoy helping people on their reliability and maintenance journeys.
Well, that's a really good question because for me, I worked at General Motors for 30 years. And when I left there, I was a global lead for Maximo, or the software system, and also for condition monitoring and responsible for a process. We built a global common process for how to do everything from emergency to project work in the maintenance organization. So I remember telling Terry O'Hanlon, if there's one thing I'd really like to do, and that would be to mentor some people through some of the pains that we went through. I mean, we learned a lot from trial and error. We learned a lot from each other, and even though that was a tough road for us, it gave some valuable lessons, and it's part of what I'll talk about today on the leadership piece about what it means and how to take a stand for reliability in a leadership position, and then actually make a change.
That sounds great. Thanks so much. We're definitely looking forward to it. And before Dave gets started with his presentation, just like to go over a few housekeeping items. The session is being recorded, so you will not be able to speak and ask questions, but you can ask questions in the question section of the webinar and the question feature. And you can send them anytime during the presentation, any questions you have for Dave. And when Dave's presentation is over, we'll probably have about 10 minutes or so to answer those questions, and he'll be able to respond to them during that time. If you'd like to receive a copy of today's presentation, please let us know during the survey that will appear at the end of today's session. And the recorded webinar will be available on excelix.com/community shortly after the end of the session, at least by tomorrow. So I think that's it for us. Please remember to ask us your questions. And Dave, let's get started. We're looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it, Lori. I mean, I was really pleased to be invited to speak, and this is a subject that's near and dear to me. I have a lot of passion around this. I teach the Certified Reliability Leadership course for reliabilityweb.com, and again, this is a real passion for me. So I'll step into it and get started. So first, let's just say a little bit about myself. And they're kind by saying I have over 20 years, because I have well over 30 years in this business, but in the asset condition monitoring and the condition-based technologies at General Motors, as well as software system for the work order system. And then I've done a lot of international training and handled diverse cultures and languages. And we won a Chairman's Award of what I mentioned about that global common process that we built. 12 languages across the world, and many different systems, and to build a global common process with swim lanes and flow charts of how to do the work was tremendous work. And then we also got a CIO award for successful enterprise asset management deployment in Liuzhou, China. And then I'm certified I'm a CRL, Certified Reliability Leader, a certified CMRP, and a certified maintenance and reliability professional. I'm also certified in infrared and ultrasound and in Maximo deployment professional. So where does safety fit in? It's always best to start with a safety message. So, if I didn't start with this, I'd feel kind of like we didn't do it right. I've been doing these type of presentations for a long time, and the safety message is just paramount, right? We at Reliability Web would like you to think of reliability much in the same context you think of safety. But let's get on with the safety message. So reliable equipment doesn't require workers to be put in harm's way. And the size and scope of repairs are smaller if you're doing PMs on them, and it makes for safer repairs because they're planned. Hazards are eliminated or mitigated in the planning process. By the way, these are really important words, eliminate or mitigate, when we're talking about failure and talking about defect elimination. So these are important words to remember. And then planned jobs allow fewer opportunities for the maintenance worker to improvise. And in fact, it brings back some memories of mine when I remember we'd be some really bad breakdowns, and you hear somebody say, "Hey, just do something," and that's kind of my cue to say, "Stop, take two, and talk to your team and make sure nobody's about to get hurt." In fact, there's been much research done on this, and this one's from ExxonMobil, and they proved that you're 5 times more likely to get hurt doing a reactive job than doing a planned job. So if you increase your chances of injury, and they measured this with near miss and with lost day. And so if you look at the big picture here, you're 5 times more likely to hurt someone in doing these reactive jobs. It makes the reliability picture so much more important to your team, and you want to work from a reliable situation. In fact, and this poll comes from OSHA in 2016, that we lost 127 police officers, 35 firefighters, but over 470 maintenance workers. So whether you know it or not, we work in a dangerous environment, and it's up to us to set the bar for safety. And with that, I'll move into my presentation. So why reliability leadership is required? Well, being good at your job just isn't enough. Industry is looking for leaders who are willing to step outside their comfort zone and take a stand for reliability and to make a difference in their business. Operations, quality, HR, maintenance, and engineering teams need help. The pool of skilled technicians in engineering support continues to get smaller. We hear this every day in the news. We need leaders who are never satisfied with an end game, but seeking to go next. Where do we go next? So the future reliability leader professional will have a strong imagination, be a person with a drive for solving problems, a drive for getting better at their business. They'll be required to make faster, more accurate decisions. We are in the information age. Open-minded to innovation and action plans, and surrounding themselves with the best teams. All of these are super important. I stretched this out a little bit farther. So what does this future reliability professional look like? A professional person that acts with earned knowledge of what to do, when to do it, continuously training, learning, and certifying in their craft. They know when to call for help or outside influences to assure that the integrity of the physical asset, the scheduled process, and quality are all considered before action is taken. A person well-versed in varied maintenance sciences, open-minded to innovation, adaptable in action plans that support the current situation, recognizing that all problems are not presented or solved equally. I wrote this up particularly because I had to go back in my memory banks of some of the significant breakdowns. And if you ever worked into an assembly plant, my background being in General Motors, the final line is critical pay point, and downtime is really significantly expensive. And so when you consider that back, in the 80s and 90s, we were considered heroes if we were really good troubleshooters, and we'd run out on a line, and in fact, I'd get a call over the radio. Sometimes I think, I know just what that is, and we're going to run out there and we're going to take care of that really quickly, and we'll be heroes and whatever. But the point is, sometimes I get out there line of what I thought was the problem because of something completely different, something I'd never seen before. And of course, then we're calling in the troops to try to get some help here and figure out what actually happened. And so I think it's really important that we recognize that problems are not presented or solved equally. So core conversations of leadership. These come right from Reliability Web. This is what we teach in the Certified Reliability Leadership. Integrity, authenticity, responsibility, and aim. And I'll go into detail. Integrity, do what you say you will do and clean up your messes. And we always say that you're always striving for integrity. You never really reach the mountaintop. You try, and many of us want to say we have high integrity. The problem is things happen. Life just keeps happening around you. And if you make a promise to do something at a certain time and something else happens that just doesn't allow that to happen, your integrity, gets called into question. And so if this happens 2 or 3 times, especially if you're in charge of a group or a team and you promise that something's going to happen by a certain time and it just doesn't happen, no matter what the reasons are, leaders are always judged on their actions, and they're not judged on their words. Words mean something, but you're always judged at the end of the day by your actions. And authenticity. So we want you to be who you say you are. People in your sphere know who you are and where you stand, and they're not confused about it. Responsibility. Take a stand for reliability. Reliability is for everyone, no one left out. Get started. Remember I said that we should think of reliability much in the same context of safety. In other words, everybody knows that it is a core, absolute cultural issue that we want to attest. And I'll explain more about that as we get farther in. And then AIM, the mission, the vision, the values of your organization. Whenever you hear AIM from Reliability Web, it's talking about your vision, your mission, your goals, your objectives for your organization, always working for something bigger than oneself. And when you set up your KPIs or any kind of measuring, you want to make sure that they're aimed at reaching the vision, the mission, the goals, the objectives of your organization. And I like to talk about this because I think people get confused about this. Reliability leadership is not reliability management. So let me repeat that. Reliability leadership is not reliability management. Management is not leadership. You can manage a lot of different things, but it doesn't mean that you're leading or being a leader or taking a stand for reliability or leadership. So reliability management and asset management is as critical to mission success as reliability leadership. This workshop's not about management. It's about being a reliability leader. This comes right from the workshop that I teach, and that's why it's in there. And the effective exercise of reliability leadership as your self-expression. However, you should be able to determine when management is required and when leadership is required. And when we teach reliability leadership, it's super important that everyone understands their value stream and what's in it for them. So you see WIFM over here on the right side. What's in it for me? If people don't understand what's in it for them, it is really difficult to get them to support and promote what you're doing. So what does that mean? Culture change is what it really is. You can't manage your way to a culture change. You have to lead your way to a culture change. So resistance to reliability leadership, there's lots of different issues here. Significant resistance will occur after communications about training. Significant resistance will arise during the implementation. Mid-level managers are most significant source of resistance. And I want to stop right there and say that it's not their fault. They're measured by what they accomplish. If we don't measure the right things, it's very difficult for mid-level managers to get on the reliability train and get really excited about it if they're being measured to other items that are not particularly contributing to reliability. So many times we have to show them what's in it for them, and then we also have to set KPIs that make sense for them so that we can, help them get on the reliability train with the rest of the group. When the team lacks a common language and understanding, resistance is also increased. In other words, if they don't understand your mission and your vision and what's in it for them, you're going to have a really hard time with this. And resistance is also found at every level and mostly avoidable if you can plan or prepare, mostly just because it's people. People's personalities are like, yes, I'll change as long as we all change my way. So how can you avoid this resistance? Number one, adopt a common framework, and I'll talk about that at the very end of the presentation. Communicate with all stakeholders, and I mean right away. You should have this communication at the very beginning of the initiative, not at the end, not in the middle, right at the beginning. Engagement by addressing stakeholder concerns, awareness of why reliability leadership and what it is and will be changing and when, and best by a certain time, and also include everyone, including management, supervisors, and executive support. And then campaign and recruit for buy-in. People, remember, will not buy in if they haven't heard or they don't figure out what's in it for them. So what is this lack of leadership? Well, most organizations do not have a basic understanding of reliability, or what we call the truth about failure. Failure reliability occurs to stakeholders as how it will occur in the plant. Most failures are not related to time usage, so restoration tasks are of little use or time that really time tasks are of little use and may cause even more failures. We really have to look at conditions. Most reliability improvement programs fail due to the lack of executive sponsorship. Executive sponsors lack understanding of reliability and what is expected of them. Most organizations suffer from an inconsistent mix of leadership, integrity, and responsibility. Integrity means doing what you say you will do and what is expected of you in your role. Most organizations fail to create a context of reliability of everyone or with no one left behind. And that means including everybody from the CEO to the sweeper in this cultural move. Many organizations mistake reliability as a maintenance activity rather than a cross-functional way of doing business. That's the most important line that we're talking about here. We need to understand that it's a cross-functional way of doing business, grounded in language with a broad understanding of basic concepts and ideas. So we have to talk about what is the reliability journey, who is our executive sponsor with enough clout to stop scope creep and to make sure that we keep moving and take roadblocks out of the way. Integrity, all of us working with integrity, and then make sure that human capital management, who somebody's assigned these and has accountability. Leaders know, for critical thinking and learning, that questions are way more powerful than answers. Questions give you access to a whole new realm of opportunities. The hardest thing is for us to back up, stop judging, and stop making statements. Ask some honest questions, inquire for understanding and clarity before you make statements. I remember when I was a lot younger, I used to be a little more aggressive about this, and I would see something that's going on and, right away start thinking about how upset I was about it. Today, I stop, try not to judge, try not to make a statement, and try to ask an honest question. Maybe they don't know the value. Maybe we have not trained them. Maybe we haven't given our expectations. I have to ask myself all those questions before I even make a statement. So we want to inquire for understanding and clarity. The best way to think about this is if you're on a team, if you're on a throughput team of any kind, and your objective is to make a difference, that team should have each other's back. In other words, I trust them, I know them, and when someone else comes to me and says, hey, one of your team members is doing this or that or whatever, and I'm supposed to take a negative stance, the first thing out of my mouth should be something like, wait a minute, I know this person, I trust this person, I have their back and they have mine, and I will go ask them, for clarity before I make a statement. And that's what we mean about this. An honest question, inquire for understanding and clarity before you make a statement. Leaders also develop deep listening skills. So human hearing is like a microphone that converts vibration to electrical impulses, right? Those vibrations are transmitted to the brain. Too much information coming in sometimes sets off our filters. They are set up to manage flows. So let's talk about what your filters are. Remember to be aware of your personal filters. Your filters are you. You're a product of your environment. You have all kinds of issues going on in your head. Your family has issues. Things may be going on in your life with your children, your parents, your grandparents, your nieces and nephews and uncles and aunts, and you may have all kinds of issues. You may have cars breaking down. You may have house issues. The problem is we carry all this baggage with us. And there are other issues that you're carrying around with you, other filters. People have lied to you in the past, or they've treated you poorly, or any of a number of different personal issues that may have come up. And so we are products of our environment, and we carry that baggage with us. Therefore, when someone comes to us on our team that we want to trust or whatever, and they tell us something, we run it through our filter first. Well, I've heard that before. Well, that's going to go in this ear and out the other because I don't trust them, or I don't know them well enough, or whatever it is. So it's hard to take that position of, I'm going to listen, I'm going to trust, and I'm going to do something, I'm going to take action. And then, and it's very important to have that kind of a trust conversation with people that you're working with on your team, so they know that you have their back and you expect them to have yours, and that you build this team, that I'll call it a leadership team, that has this trust for each other. Your first impulse should be to trust, not to not trust. And if you can't that relationship built with your team, it will be very difficult to build this reliability culture that I'm talking about. That's why I say leadership is so needed today. If we can just build these leadership teams that have deep understanding and care and trust for each other, it will be so much easier for you to build a culture that people will listen to. And people will want to be around that. In fact, I always tell people charisma is not an accident. Some people are particularly handsome or pretty and they get more attention, but the truth of it is people who have charisma have that personality that people just want to be around. It's not by accident. They've worked at it. So again, listen to understand, not to prepare your next point. Many times we're listening, but we're just preparing our next point, and that's really not listening, is it? So here's an example of what we talk about as a reliability leader. Make a declaration in your words, and your words mean something, by the way. I am a reliability leader. This is an example of what we do when we teach the CRL. I declare that I view and live my life from the stand of reliability. You can count on me to look at and deal with my life from the perspective of being the cause of reliability. And this is also called taking a stand. You heard me mention that earlier when I was doing the intro piece. We, as reliability leaders, take a stand. You don't have to be the superintendent. You don't have to be the plant manager. You could be a team leader. You could be a technician. But you take a stand for what reliability means to your value stream. So when I talk about your value stream, where do you fit? Do you fit in work execution? Do you fit in engineering? Do you fit in HR? Do you fit in business processes or in the audits for TS and QS and health and safety and all these other audits that take place? You fit somewhere. If you understand your value stream and you take a stand to make it do that right, and you relate that to reliability just as tightly as you would relate it to safety, now the culture has a chance. And we try to get everyone to understand from that perspective that you can be a reliability leader and you don't have to be in charge. It does help, though, and it for sure is paramount for this to work as a cultural change, that your leadership is on board. So where does this leadership live? Is it personal or is it cultural? Well, in a classroom, I'd wait for you to answer this, but since we're on a webinar, I'm answering it for you. And the answer is yes. It's me and it's us. In other words, the 900-pound gorilla in the room is people. So if we want reliability leadership, if we want reliability culture, it's going to have to be the hard way. Process, change, cultural change, and personal change. So it's me or us. Something that we have noticed, and we do a lot of research. If you're familiar with Uptime Magazine, we do a lot of research, and so one of our brain busters is the organization's culture and their equipment reliability always seem to be a match. Now, you might look at that and think, well, what do they really mean by that? What we're saying is that if the atmosphere where you work, if your environment of your plant is very, very negative, it's very unlikely that you're going to have great performance. Now, what I have seen in some cases that performance is pretty good because the market is so good. But what happens when the market gets poor? I can give you a quick story. In 1985, I started at General Motors at the truck plant in Flint, Michigan. Every single truck we made was sold before we had it built. Well, by the mid-90s, gas prices had gone way up. And now we had a lot of trucks sitting out there behind the building that we couldn't move because people just couldn't afford it. Now, the issue with that, what I'm getting at, is that then the money guys for the business are looking at all of the people and all of the divisions and all of the different organizations inside of the company saying, are you operating efficiently? Well, guess what? You got to tighten up now. And so I guess my advice for that is the culture, the leadership, and the performance all have to get in the context of high reliability, because you don't know when your rainy day is coming. So what is reliability leadership? By definition, reliability leadership is defined as actions. Remember I said you're judged by your actions. So this defined as actions that result in a created future that wasn't going to happen anyway. So that's a little bit different from other certifications, isn't it? The certification says, I am going to take a stand for reliability, and my words and my actions are going to create a future that wasn't going to happen anyway. And that's a different approach. I love this wheel. It's very simple. There's not much to this, but I think it should be hanging behind every leader's desk. And every day you should pick 2 or 3 of these and focus on them until it becomes a habit. If you just go around this wheel, and I'll pick just a few of these, set a good example. Operate with integrity. Inspire your team. Recognition even when people don't think it belongs there. In fact, so the hardest thing that we do, in my opinion, when it comes to reliability is we have a hard time celebrating something that didn't happen. All right, so we have to find out where these are at. So if I were using an example of defect elimination where an operator pointed out a limit switch that they've been adjusting by hand, every 10 jobs, or they've been making or just giving it a little tweak here and there, just so we just use a few seconds every once in a while. And then, you bring that to the meeting, and they bring it to the meeting and say, you don't have to adjust this little limit switch every once in a while. And you find out it's a very expensive downtime line, and you find out that, hey, at the end of the year, this is worth a lot of money. Somebody needs to celebrate that. Someone needs to make a big deal of it and say, hey, operator so-and-so came up with a fix that saved us potentially this much money. Actually, it's real money in your pocket because it's not failing. Now, here's the question that I would ask you in a reliability culture. Who knew? Not the reliability engineer, not the technician, not the team leader, only the operator. And the operator brought that to light, and we should celebrate that. That's an example. A sweeper is sweeping by very expensive piece of equipment, and he or she sweeps that floor every day, does a really wonderful job, and one day that piece of equipment sounds a little bit different. And because it sounds a little bit different, they're compelled, not thinking about it, they're compelled to go tell somebody, hey, I don't know how important this is, but today this sounds different. That's a culture change. That does not happen by accident, and it's not easy to do. But also, those are the things we look for. That's inspiration, that's integrity, and then give recognition for those folks. You want to recognize that sweeper and say, hey, thank you for bringing that to us. We were able to capture this problem before it became a breakdown, and we even make a big deal of it, right? So have vision, expect the best. I always say if you don't give your expectations, you'll hit them every time. I've had people tell me, well, you can't give expectations to some folks. I think that's wrong. I think you can give an expectation to almost anybody. And in fact, I like to give expectations, and on top of that, I like to give stretch goals. And I find that people really love to get stretch goals. So if we expect the best, we set a good example, we live with integrity, we inspire people, we give recognition and encouragement and support, great things will happen for us. So 10 life lessons for reliability leaders. It's okay not to have an answer or an opinion for everything. Never work strictly for money or do a task for prestige or status. Be generous. Learn to trust. This is the hardest thing for us to do as human beings because we have our filters and our baggage, but we need to learn to trust and make sure people know that we're counting on them. And if they break our trust, go ask them a question. Don't make a statement. Number 4, create pockets of quiet stillness in your life. You need to zen out sometimes. Don't let stress get the best of you. When people tell you who you are, believe them. When people tell you who they are, believe them. And when people tell you who you are, you don't have to believe them, especially if it's a negative. How we spend our days is how we spend our lives. In other words, you part your hair the same at work as you do at home. Don't try to live 2 lives. You're either a reliable, authentic, responsible leader, or you're not. The myth of overnight success is a myth. I figured out a long time ago if I had to live by luck, I was in trouble. Seek things that amplify your spirit. There's many things in your business that you'll find it will just excite you. In fact, if you have a leadership team that changes a culture, it's euphoric. It's one of the best things you'll ever do in your life. Imagine, then share with your team. Choose constructive over cynicism. Build things up. Do not tear them down. An abundance mentality will overwhelm negative activity. It's been proven over and over again. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, Zig Ziglar. I'm a fan of a lot of positive abundance mentality. I think if you fill your head with positive things, you don't have time for negative. So leaders in human capital, this is another pet peeve. I think it's important we understand. Asset value is realized when the correct people with the appropriate skills are placed in the roles that require them. Many times, especially in big businesses like where I came from, we have the wrong people in the wrong jobs. They're not happy, they're not comfortable, and they're not performing at their best. We have to be very good at this. So typical human capital management issues are workforce planning, compensation planning, talent acquisition, onboarding. A lot of this onboarding it's becoming way better today, but onboarding as a process is super important so that these new folks understand what your vision is, what your mission is, what your goals and objectives are. And in fact, it's kind of almost blatant that we have to tell folks, you need to add value to our process. Learning and development, performance management, career pathing. This is another pet peeve. Many companies that are doing career pathing are attracting the very best people. Find out how to do this. Succession planning. As we all know, the technician and engineering average ages in manufacturing are very high right now. And we went through about a 20-year lull. The numbers are scary. In fact, I was at a conference about a year ago put on by Siemens that said that we would have 10 million technical people short in the engineering and tech fields by 2020. And I believe that's true. And that's globally, by the way, 10 million. And then work environment. So there's so much for human capital for us to work on. So the challenge in today's environment, organizations will be able to retain people by offering challenging and rewarding work environment. In fact, there's proof it's not all about the money. It's more about people feeling they're an important part of an organization, feeling like they can achieve growth in their work life, and being part of a team with like goals and objectives. These things seem to be the most important. Leaders are also responsible for corporate responsibility. Another one really important that a lot of us miss. Reliability and asset management often result in lower energy consumption. If your machines are aligned and balanced properly, if the vibration is at the accepted level, you're going to use a lot less electricity. If you look at some of these big manufacturing companies, they're just using so much power that they don't have to use because they're not doing these jobs right. Also, through compressed air leak detection and steam trap testing, the most expensive thing you'll ever purchase, by the way, is compressed air. Equipment is operating properly and uses a lot less energy. Equipment that does not start and stop as often yields less waste and scrap, and highly reliable organizations are much more likely to offer sustainable employment. This is something else that new people are looking for when they come to your business. Highly reliable organizations are usually filled with people who are self-actualized and who can make significant social contributions. This only happens, by the way, this last bullet, when people know what's in it for them and they trust and believe in the organization they work for. Part of corporate responsibility is how organizations take responsibility for managing the impact of their activities on society and environment. I won't mention any on this webinar, but there are times when corporations have screwed up. And when they do, it hits the newspapers, it hits the national news, it makes a big deal. And so you have to get out there. I always tell people when I'm teaching the CRL that you are responsible for your PR. If you're waiting for the newspaper or the TV cameras to come down and tell you how great you are, don't hold your breath. So a lot of companies do things like Habitat for Humanity, work in soup kitchens, and do different types of I'll call it social work in their towns, their cities, their rural areas, wherever they are. And that is really good press for them, and they should go out and make sure they are, again, responsible for their own press. Corporate responsibility should be an enterprise-wide engagement that viewed as an investment in a sustainable future. Corporate responsibility is relevant to asset management as an organization with local communities, the environment, and the society in general, and some of its key stakeholders. Asset management is all about adopting a structured approach to addressing stakeholder needs. So another example, so these are very quick. Specify, design or choose, purchase or build, install, commission, operate, disposal, and residual liability. As we say, from lust to dust. And I'll show that in more detail. So we use the PIDF curve, and as you can see, it's changed significantly. This curve used to start right there at potential failure, at that line right above operating hours, where we start with the predictive sciences. So you look at potential, ultrasonic, any condition monitoring sciences are in here. But the realization is that this is where failure has already happened. So I'm looking at lagging indicators. If you go to the far left, and we teach this, and we're very deeply ingrained in this, and we really push this hard, from lust to dust, design for reliability and purchase for a purpose. You would not even consider at any price a $20,000 automobile or a $150,000 automobile that you couldn't drive 150 times from Seattle to New York City and not break down. Why is that? Because you, the customer, has decided that we're going to require it. And guess what? The automotive business is responded. Now, 25 years ago, that wasn't necessarily true, was it? Today, it is. So when we talk about zero failure possibilities, we talk about zero defect possibilities. We're looking at a lot deeper water, and we're looking at possibilities we never thought would happen 25 years ago. But let's follow this out a little bit more. So we have precision installation. We have laser alignment and torque specs, commissioning procedures, operating for reliability. In other words, we're well trained. We know exactly how to run this equipment. We're not just throwing people at it. We clean to inspect, and we do precision lubrication. But the most important there, in my opinion, from what I've seen in the past, are this design for reliability. Because remember, when you design for reliability, you're designing in zero failure, or you've eliminated or mitigated failure. If you do not design it properly, you do not build it for a purpose, you're going to design in failure. And that failure you will live with for the whole rest of the life of that asset. So it's extremely important that we do this really well. And of course, bridging this value gap from CAPEX to OPEX. So what that means and I lived this through the bankruptcy for General Motors, and that was, if you're going to spend capital dollars, you're going to take capital dollars out of the operations, you better show me a return on investment. 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or whatever the number is that you throw down. Because operations, when you take money out of operations, you've got to be accountable to it. There was a time when we weren't very accountable to it, and it didn't work very well. And that's changed. The information age has changed this significantly. So where does this fit in? So in capital project management, it's a long-term process to acquire, build, operate, maintain, and dispose of an asset. Remember the whole life cycle of an asset. This includes the disciplines of planning, organizing, scheduling, managing, leading, and managing the resources to achieve specific goals. Reliability, maintainability, availability, safety, sustainability should all be addressed. And then there's planning and scheduling. A planned job is half the cost of the same work in a reactive mode. Planning and scheduling impacts labor and material costs. We always say the work ratio is 15 to 20 technicians per planner, and people go, wow, that's just so few. But the point is, it's very difficult to do this very well. For effective planning and scheduling, work needs to be clearly defined, and scheduling should process at least 80% of all of your maintenance activities. Always use a strategy. This is an example of a strategy. You can find this in many places. We used to use this years ago, and now I see it's even on Google. But use a strategy to determine your criticality. If you look to the bottom right, there's a run to failure strategy. If I go through all the boxes and I answer my yeses and my nos in a particular order. If you look on the left, there's highly critical, and there's normal, all based on a strategy. But again, these are questions that you should be asking yourself. Do I have a strategy to determine criticality? Because if you've not, you haven't earned the right to talk about FEMAs, RCMs, or PM optimization. So why use a framework? Pretty simple for me. I thought about this for a long time, flatly because it works. We had the 12 elements and 66 key features at GM, but I actually like Reliability Webs a lot better. It's more holistic, and I'll show that to you on the next slide. But at large corporations and organizations, the toughest thing to accomplish is to get everyone from all departments on board and headed in a single direction. The Uptime Elements Framework is an easy-to-follow roadmap that all departments can follow. Each department or site can easily relate their value stream to at least one of the elements. Usually several of the elements can be aligned with goals and objectives of the company, as well as the responsibility of each group. And so when I use the structured framework, I want you to think of, when you look at this picture, to think about where you fit. If I use the RASIC like I'm doing in the bottom left, where are you responsible and where are you accountable? Are you responsible in reliability engineering? Are you responsible or accountable in asset condition management? Are you responsible in work execution, where the rubber meets the road? Are you accountable or responsible in leadership, like human capital management, executive sponsorship, competency-based learning? Are you responsible or accountable in the business processes, the procedures, the policies, and the documents that make decision-making transparent because you followed the policy? You see, there's so many ways to look at this. And in some cases, if you're a general manager of some types, you might go across several of these domains. And for sure, you can identify the dependencies that you have on other people. If you're in engineering and asset condition monitoring and those types of things, or even in work execution, you know you're relying on your spare parts people, MRO, spare parts management team. You know you're also dependent upon reliability strategy development for routes and condition monitoring. And then, of course, the asset condition management piece there. And, you know, what are those sciences that we're using? Is it vibration? Is it ultrasound? Is it infrared? Okay, we're getting to the end. So I'll just wanted to make a quick note. I'll be in a few places. I'm doing a reliability leader training symposium in Birmingham, UK. I'll be in Budapest, Hungary, doing another CRL. We are doing a co-located with the Vibration Annual Conference in New Orleans. I'll be doing a asset condition management course there, and that we'll be doing a certified reliability leadership training there also with Terry O'Hanlon. And then in July, I have another leadership roadmap, and Maximo World August 7th to the 9th, and then Euro Maintenance September 22nd through the 28th. And with that, I'll turn it back to Lori. Thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll take questions and or comments.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. That was fantastic, and we are honored to have you present with us today. We have a few questions coming in, and please make sure that you send us any questions that you may have. The first one that's come through is, and I think this is a pretty good one, how do you start listening without your filters? What are some steps people can take to remember to do that, if you have any tips?
Well, yeah, I do. I will tell you, this is one of the hardest things you will ever do. You have to consciously make an effort, and you have to keep correcting yourself. In fact, in my personal opinion, I worked on this for a long time. We did a study of the 5 love languages, as well as the 4 personalities, and what we call career anchors in individual growth strategies. And so from my perspective, this is one of the hardest things you ever do, is to stop yourself, regroup when you find yourself not listening, and you're preparing to make another statement, or you are ready to just jump and make a statement. That's when you have to, and it's practice. I'll tell you, it's just flat practice. For me, I had to really work on this. In fact, I'll be quite honest with you. When I was younger, I was a little more aggressive. I used to look people in the eye and tell you, I'll outrun you and I'll work you. Please keep up. And but now I know better, and I learned to listen to people without my filters on. But it's practice, and I can't really tell you any other way. It's a conscious effort for sure.
Thanks so much. That's a great answer. The next question is, when starting a reliability journey, what is the best way to engage company leadership for executive sponsorship and get them to understand that reliability must be a cultural phenomenon or change?
Super hard nut to crack for sure. My feeling is pretty simple about this though, and I say it's simple, but it's hard to do. The simplistic piece of it is get them to a roadmap. I do these roadmaps all over the United States. They're one day. You come in and you see what reliability leadership is, or you get them to a 2, 3, or 4 day CRL workshop. I'm doing these for all kinds of folks, from C-level all the way down to team technicians. And in fact, it's growing at an alarming rate. But the point is, somehow we have to show the value of that culture to leadership if we ever want to get on board. And it's a difficult thing to get leadership to step out and take a day to do this, but it's probably the best way. Of course, there's all kinds of reading material. You can go to the reliability website. In fact, we'd like you to go to the reliability website when you think about anything in relationship to reliability, because there's a lot there, including maintenance tips, lots of videos, much reading, and then of course the Uptime magazine has so much in it about it. But reliability as a culture is very difficult for people to understand at first, because we're so busy doing what we do every day, and getting to change that to a mantra of reliability, which again, right, it's a pay me now or pay me later. So we're paying later all the time right now. It would be much better if we did some proactive work around reliability, changed our culture. In fact, those companies that are changing the culture, there's all kinds of crazy numbers out there about how well they're doing. And if you can come to a CRL or to a workshop or a conference, we can show you some of it, but it's amazing the difference that it makes in these companies' profit margin, I'll say.
Thanks so much, Dave. This next question is similar, but I think it gets a little more specific, so I'll ask it and you can let me know if it's basically the same answer. Someone asked, I'm just beginning the journey through building a reliability culture. Where should you focus your efforts on the beginning? Developing a team, strategy, getting buy-in from corporate management? Which of those should be your first step, if you can answer that?
Yeah, that is kind of the same answer, but the point is, first steps, especially, it depends on where you're at. Now, if this person is a supervisor or a manager or something like that, I definitely say you can start reading, you can start doing your own research right away. But the most important thing, again, is get them to a workshop. If we can get them to a workshop and they can see the value, and let me put it this way, these workshops have gone crazy with attendance lately, and people are getting it. Now, here's what I see purely from a competitive perspective. We are in the information age. Things are moving fast. If you don't get on this cultural change train when it comes to reliability, your competition is. So my personal opinion is you need to do this. If you're not doing it, you'll soon fall behind. As you well know in this business, any of these businesses today, if you're stagnant, you're losing. So from my perspective, you just got to do it. We've been saying the same things for 25 years. And I'm not, and I'm pointing at myself when I say that, about what science to use, about what tool to use, about how to sort data. But we haven't really gone after the culture from the sweeper to the CEO to come up with how I'm compelled to live in a reliability culture. And that's way different. So again, you have to start somewhere on this journey, but it depends a lot if you're a high-level manager or a technician, because you need your high-level managers to get this eventually if you want it to happen. So I would say that's where you start. Try to get that going. If you can't, surely work on yourselves. We have, I'll call frontline workers who've taken a stand for reliability and made huge differences in their businesses just because they said this is the right thing to do. Let's get it done.
That's awesome. And the person who asked that question had just attended the Las Vegas conference and is a manager. So I think your answer helped. If not, they can ask some more questions. The next one is very specific to you. How long did it take to get your management team at GM to buy into the program? How many people did you have to engage? And how frequently would you recommend engaging with the people you need to help you get started?
Well, so let me be clear about that. My leadership team at General Motors and I never got on a reliability journey together. What we did get on is the common process journey together. I left there before I started working for Terry O'Hanlon and doing this reliability culture change. But they did a huge culture change just based on common process, okay? And boy, was that hard. That was a 2.5-year journey. And we had regional managers all over the world. We had 12 languages to work through. We had 312 work types, to give you an idea, in our CMMS. We had to get down to 12, which by my measurement today, it'd still be too many. But that's beside the point. But yeah, this is, and there's no shortcuts. I used to tell people, in fact, I was the guy who wanted to take the shortcuts. Just tell me what the answers are, and I'll go have my people do it. That's not the answer. The answer is, if you want an embedded process, there's no shortcut. It's hard work, showing people what's in it for them, and working it the hard way. And leadership first, if whenever possible, right? And then middle management, and of course, right on down, we have to be sure that everyone knows what's in it for them, or they just don't play. And especially in the United States, I think society has developed this why and why me perspective. So you want to change why and why me. A lot of the rest of the world doesn't quite do it that way, but we do here in the United States. So we definitely have to do the hard work around building up the why. You'll hear us at Reliability Web talk about what it is and why you should be doing it. We don't do a lot of deep how. We do a lot of what it is and why you should be doing it. I'd start with the uptime elements, because when people understand the culture, the dependencies across the culture, across all those domains, it's way easier to explain where they fit. Do I need HR? Yes. Do I need quality? Yes. Do I need operations? Yes. Do I need technicians? Yes. Do I need reliability engineering? Yes. And I can show you where you fit. Do I need the processes, procedures, and documents to follow? Yes. So I'd say start with a structured framework if you can. And again, no shortcut to the process. Everyone has got to understand what's in it for them, or it just doesn't work. I hope that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think it did answer the question. Attendees, we have about 5 more minutes for questions, so please send in more if you have them. I have the next one lined up. So if you don't get your management support, are you dead in the water, or are there things you can do on your own team or in your own work that could help get the reliability journey started?
No, in fact, we have one of the guys in our, I'll call it our network, who works for a water company, who took a stand, and he's a supervisor. He's not a superintendent, he's not a plant manager, he's a supervisor. He took a stand and said, you know what, we need to have a strategic asset management plan, because we don't have one. In other words, when we buy an expensive asset, we don't have a procedure or policy in place of what to do. Do I get the information to our software guys? Do I get it to my IT people? Do I get it to my CMMS folks? Do I get it to my EAM folks? Do I get it to my spare parts procurement folks? Where am I spreading out this information? And then do I have a life cycle cost plan built? Those kind of things. Do I have a warranty date? And so there's no policy. So he went about putting one together based on some, examples that he'd seen other places. And, and he persevered through some negativity, and I'm not going to go into detail about that. And guess what? Now they have a strategic asset management plan, and the board of directors there are now adopting it. So he took a stand for reliability. He's making a true change in that business, and he's being recognized recognized for it. We recognized him, in fact, year before last for an Uptime Award, which is very difficult to get for one of the other initiatives that he's done. So I look at it like this: you take a stand for reliability, even if it's in your own pool, you can make a significant difference. But it's got to be the right thing, right? It has to be something that makes sense and it's a no-brainer, right? Let's do this thing because it's the right thing to do. It's not always going to work, for sure, but when it does, it's an amazing thing that can happen, and it sets an example for all those around you. And they go, you know what? I want to be on that team. And I look and I can tell you, if I could talk about it offline, but that guy is special, and that kind of a stand for reliability and the difference that he's made in his business, it's just paramount to their business.
Thanks again, Dave. We're going to try to get in 2 more questions. This next one, I'm going to hope I'm asking it correctly. With reliability, can you apply it to the maintenance of architecture, to the maintenance of a facility or facility management, or is it more with electromechanical equipment?
Oh, no, for sure. No, it's in every aspect, right? Lust to dust. It doesn't matter what it is, right? How you build, how you do the architecture, how you put it together. So I even recommend that you have an upfront team that does this cross-functional study, if you will, on everything that you do. In other words, you should have somebody from safety, from ergonomics, from operations, from, if it's in this case, if it's facilities, maybe it's your field facilities folks, it's certainly your condition monitoring folks. And they should all have discussions around right from the very beginning. Remember I said, don't wait. You'll discover that you are building in failure and you didn't even know it. I mean, I could show you examples of how we've done this, and we've shown people how it works. We went out and looked at a conveyor system for one thing. So we're looking at this conveyor system, and the gearbox that was hanging underneath this was in a position that you couldn't get at it and do vibration readings on it unless you put remote sensors on it. That was one issue they discovered in design. Another one they discovered was that the webbing on the conveyor wasn't big enough to pull the gearbox through it if they ever had to replace it. So they bolted those on in that particular place where the gearbox was instead of welding them. Another issue was a safety issue. The disconnect was too close to other moving parts, so they had to move that. These are all discovered in the design phase, but the right people have to be involved. And and I could tell you stories like that, a lot of them. So from a facilities perspective, I'm sure there's lots of them around HVAC systems, vent systems, ductwork systems, electrical systems. There's so many other opportunities out there. But again, it should be cross-functional. I think that just works the best.
Great, thank you. And our final question is kind of a shameless plug for Reliability Web. Someone asked if you guys have any plans to come to Australia with a CRL workshop or a reliability roadmap. And I guess if you don't, maybe you should.
We've been having these discussions for a while now, but I would definitely have to refer that to Terrence O'Hanlon, the CEO. He's in charge of that part, but we have definitely been having discussions around bringing CRL as well as other things, other operations from Reliability Web to Australia as well. And again, I told you I'll be in Europe twice this year. So we're moving, and Mexico too. I mean, we're moving all over the place. Terry is all over the world. I never know exactly where he is unless I ask him.
Well, Dave, thank you again so much for joining us and presenting today. And I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon. Thanks again.
Thanks, Lori. I surely appreciate it, and I hope that it was worthwhile for your listeners. And again, I enjoy doing this type of work. So, thank you again.
It absolutely was. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Bye bye.